All right, now we get into our discussion of practical considerations. I believe that's Jay Hill's grandmother right there in the wheelchair. Anybody can pass out tracts. Just a little subliminal message there. Or now it's not subliminal because I said it out loud. So there are precautions that we can take. Number one, check the local ordinances and find out what restrictions apply. Some restrictions on speech are completely appropriate and constitutional, and you don't want to violate those restrictions. For example, the city of Daytona Beach has an ordinance that says that it is illegal to leave tracts unattended or to place them on a car. You're not allowed to go through a parking lot anywhere in Daytona Beach and put tracts on the door handles and under the windshield wipers and all that. It's against the law. So we don't do that. We obey the law. You can hand a tract to someone that's willing to receive it, but you can't just leave it somewhere. You can't leave a stack of tracts. Don't leave the tracts in a bathroom. It's illegal in Daytona Beach. It's not illegal in DeLand. It's not illegal in Orange City. But in Daytona Beach, they have a specific ordinance that says you're not allowed to do that. And so we don't do that. You can contact the local officials. If you're going to start a new ministry in a place you haven't done it before, it's a good idea to contact local officials to give them a heads up. Don't ask permission. It gives them the wrong impression. They don't have a right to deny you permission, but if you ask permission, they think they do have a right to deny you permission, and once you ask, then somehow they tend to feel it's incumbent upon them to say no, or to say, well, we have to impose certain restrictions. And if you've checked the ordinances and there aren't already restrictions, don't ask the county officials for some restrictions. Just tell them, we're going to be going out there. We want to make sure that, that you understand what it is that we're doing. I want to give you assurances that, we understand the appropriate way to conduct ourselves. We're not going to be stepping in the street and handing tracts to people with their car windows down. By the way, that violates a state law in Florida and most other places, I expect. So we're not going to be stepping into the street to do that. We're not going to be blocking the sidewalk. We're not going to be blocking the entrances to businesses. We know how to conduct ourselves. We're here for the purpose of giving people the good news of the gospel of Jesus Christ. I usually go an extra step and tell them we are not Westboro Baptist Church. We're not here to get in people's faces and provoke them and call them names and insult people. We're here to, and I'll tell them about the gospel, when I'm talking to them, to let them know, that you're going to be there, and and sometimes you can even get assurances from them. In fact, a lot of times they're quick to do it. Oh yeah, our police department is very professional. They're very well trained. They know all about the First Amendment. They're not going to be bothering you at all. And so, can I get your name and phone number? So the third thing is bring documentation with you. When you've gotten that email from the city attorney, or you've gotten a copy of the law, go ahead and bring it with you, and that can help you in dealing with those things. We had, when we had in the early days of our Daytona Beach ministry, we had all kinds of problems with the police, and now they seem to be the most professional, the most well-trained police department. They'll come out when there's a complaint and they'll tell people they have a right to be here, they have a right to do this. But there was a time where we had all kinds of problems, including just passing out tracts on public sidewalk. And a police officer would come and say, you can't do this here. And well, why not? What law are we violating? Well, they have an ordinance in Daytona Beach called Distribution of Handbills, and this section says, prohibited generally. And here's exactly what it says. It shall be unlawful for any person to distribute or cause to be distributed to any other person any circular, handbill, dodger, or other written or printed matter for advertising purposes upon the streets, sidewalks, or other public places within the city, comma, not period, unless such handbill is distributed by handing it to a person willing to accept it. So we've had police officers come to us and say, you can't do this here. You're not allowed to pass out literature here, and where's your permit? Well, we don't need a permit, and this is protected by the First Amendment. And they said, well, we have an ordinance that prohibits it. Well, read your ordinance, here it is. And so I would carry a copy of the Daytona Beach handbill ordinance with me, and tell them, now read the whole thing, make sure I even highlighted it for them, that last clause, unless such handbill is distributed by handing it to a person willing to accept it. So if someone's willing to accept it, I'm allowed to hand it to them. If they're not, I'm not allowed to shove it in their pocket or, we can't get violent with it, but that's, so bring stuff like that with you if you have it, if you know that there's a conflict or there's likely to be a conflict or a misunderstanding. Mostly it's misunderstanding. Somebody didn't read the ordinance carefully, or they weren't well trained, and it's usually just it's not that they hate the gospel most of the time. It's usually just they need to be educated, and so I'm happy to educate them. All right, so. Practical stuff, supervise minors, review guidelines. In particular, you got kids with you, let them know how they need to conduct themselves. Let everybody in your group know how they need to conduct themselves, and make sure everybody's on the same page, and that avoids a lot of problems. Bring cell phones. Very important, so you can communicate, and you can call me if you're having trouble and somebody's not listening to you. Don't go off alone. Have somebody with you if possible. Now, many of us have had situations where we were handing out tracts or preaching or whatever, doing public ministry on our own. I'm not saying don't ever go out alone, but if you have a choice, if you're part of a group, don't stray off by yourself apart from the group. Bring somebody with you. That's part of the reason for going out together. We were at the boardwalk at Daytona Beach one time, and Brother Casey had wandered away down the boardwalk by himself. And when he came back, he told us of an incident that happened where some girl had just, grabbed him, hugged him, wrapped her arms around him, and was being inappropriate with him. And, nothing came of it, but what if somebody made an accusation against him that he did something inappropriate, either something illegal or just something, that would be an embarrassment to him and to the church and to the cause of Jesus Christ. We don't want, to allow those things to happen, and if you go with somebody, then it's a lot less likely that anybody's going to try to do something, and if they do, then at least you have a second person there that can say, hey, I saw the whole thing, and here's what happened, and so that's an extra level of protection. Bring a camera, which I guess is redundant now with bring a cell phone, because they pretty much all have cameras. You have a constitutional right to record, to video record, or take pictures of police doing, that are engaged in their official duties. So, the horror stories that you've heard of police ordering people to stop videotaping and confiscating a camera or a cell phone, those things do happen, they have happened, but the law is pretty clear now that they're not allowed to do that. Now, don't get in their face, don't crowd them, don't interfere with what they're doing, but you're allowed to go ahead and videotape and take pictures and stuff. It's also a good idea if you've been having conflicts, or if you're going to a new place where you haven't been before, which is another reason to anticipate possible conflicts, because people that aren't used to this kind of activity very often don't react very favorably. So one thing that you can do is go ahead and take some pictures and take some video of your public ministry activities in that area before there's a conflict, before there's an accusation. And that can be helpful so that if somebody calls the police and says you're being aggressive with people and you're telling people they're going to hell and you're pushing old ladies into the street and all that kind of thing, if you've got some evidence of what it is that you've been doing, that can be very helpful in dealing with the police, or if you ever end up in a court case over the incident. People very often will say whatever's convenient for them, for whatever it is they're advocating, whether it's true or not. And so it's good to have some of that ammunition on your side. Yes, sir.
You can video a police officer if there's an encounter. Can you video? Are you allowed to videotape citizens if you're having an encounter with them?
Yes. Yeah. In a public place, you are allowed to take pictures or videotape. Now, you can't have a secret microphone and secretly record somebody's conversation, but you can. In a public place, you can video what's going on in a public place, and if somebody doesn't want to be videoed, they can walk away, or they can ask you not to. When we had people protesting against us downtown, there were a bunch of college-age kids that came downtown DeLand and were just being outrageous and had all kinds of stuff on their signs and were doing different things. And somebody had started taking pictures or videotaping this one angry young woman, and she said, I don't give you permission. You do not have the right to video me. I'm not giving you permission to video me. And we don't need her permission to video her. She's standing in a public place. In fact, she's standing there holding a sign, making a public spectacle of herself. That's fair game for anybody that wants to take a picture or to make a record of what is happening and what she's doing and what she's saying. That's you can do that. So we don't need her permission. She called her stepdad, who was an attorney, and he came over, and I was standing right by her. So as he came across the street, I said hello to him, and he said, "Hi, Jake," and he came over and shook my hand, and she was not happy. But she complained to him, I didn't give him permission to videotape me, and he said, "That doesn't matter. They don't need your permission." So anyway. There's all kinds of objections that we hear, and I've listed several of the common ones. And let me say this first of all: for the drive-by hecklers who, when the light turns green, they roll down their window and they shout something at you. My advice is just ignore them. When you feel like you have to have the last word and you yell something back at them when they're halfway across the intersection, it doesn't make you look good. It's really inappropriate. And Sometimes it makes sense to engage people with these objections, in particular if they come up and talk to you. It can be a great entrance into a conversation about why we're doing what we're doing and what Jesus Christ did and what he meant to us and what he'll do for them. It can be very effective, but as far as somebody that's just yelling something at you to mock you or whatever, we don't need to feel compelled to get the last word in, and it's in many situations I think it's counterproductive. But again, it depends on the circumstance. I'm not saying this is a blanket rule. Sometimes I've answered a fool according to their folly, and sometimes I've answered not a fool according to their folly, and sometimes the reason for my answer is because I just got in the flesh in that moment, and and I shouldn't have, and other times it's appropriate. So I'm not saying there's a blanket rule, don't respond, but I would say for somebody that's just they're driving by and they do something or say something inappropriate like that, it's probably best to just let it go and rise above it. And the people that see you getting that kind of abuse and taking it well, it's a good testimony, and we've seen good results from that. But people talk about keeping it in the church, and you shouldn't be out here on the street doing this, or they want to talk about social and political issues. They want to bring up doctrinal heresies. Why aren't you telling people they have to get water baptized? Why don't you go away? We're trying to tell people about Jesus. And you can. It depends on the circumstance. If I'm out there and I'm reaching people with tracts or preaching, I don't want to stop that to argue with a Jehovah's Witness that's never going to, listen to me. On the other hand, if I'm with a group of people and there's enough people there to get the tracts covered and all of that, and I've got time to have a conversation, I still probably wouldn't waste my time with the Jehovah's Witness, but sometimes I do, and or with anybody else. I mean, it's just a judgment call. So, but don't feel obligated. You could say, I'm doing what I'm doing here. I'll give you my email address. I'll give you my phone number. If you want to talk about this, I'll be happy to follow up with you. Or you give me your phone number, and I'll talk about it later when I'm not busy. But right now, I'm busy doing this. Or I just tell people, I don't want to talk about politics. That's not what I'm here for. And you could just say, that's just. I'm not going to engage in that discussion. Sometimes you do and sometimes you don't. It's up to you. It depends on the circumstance. Sometimes it depends on the attitude of the person, talking to you. And, I find that if you are willing to talk to someone and you give them the respect to listen to what they're saying, and you can have that be the initial part of the conversation that you have, that a lot of times you can end up turning that conversation to the gospel, or at least to some spiritual issues, and and it can be productive. So I'm not saying just shut everybody down. You just make a judgment call, but